In 2026, the world wakes up to breaking news. Chinese forces have launched a full-scale invasion of Taiwan. Jets streak across the skies, amphibious units land on Taiwan's beaches, and cyberattacks cripple communication networks. The world holds its breath. A scenario once debated in think tanks has just become reality. But what would actually happen if China invades Taiwan in 2026? This isn't just another regional conflict. It would be a turning point in global power, security, and the balance of the 21st century. Because Taiwan isn't only an island, it's a strategic cornerstone for the entire Indo-Pacific, a semiconductor superpower, and a red line for the United States and its allies. If you're fascinated by geopolitical what-ifs that could reshape the world order, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dive scenarios like this. In this 5-part series, we're going to break down every layer of this hypothetical war, from China's possible invasion strategy to Taiwan's defenses, use involvement, global reactions, and the consequences no one is ready for, because an invasion in 2026 wouldn't happen in isolation. It would send shockwaves through supply chains, stock markets, and military alliances. It could redefine what war looks like in the AI era and who controls the future. How would China invade Taiwan? An invasion of Taiwan would be one of the most complex military operations in modern history. Taiwan is not Afghanistan. It's not Ukraine. It's a fortified island just 130 kilometers off the coast of China, surrounded by treacherous waters and armed with cutting-edge defenses. But China has been preparing for this moment for decades. The first phase would likely begin with cyber warfare and electronic attacks. Taiwan's command centers, energy grid, and satellite systems would be hit simultaneously to blind and paralyze the response. Expect mass disinformation campaigns to flood social media and deepfakes to confuse both the public and decision-makers. Next, China would unleash a barrage of missile strikes. Hundreds if not thousands of precision-guided missiles would rain down on airfields, radar installations, naval bases, and defensive systems. The goal? Cripple Taiwan's ability to fight back before the real battle begins. Then comes the amphibious assault. China's military would attempt a massive beach landing using ships, drones, and paratroopers. They've rehearsed it dozens of times along their eastern seaboard. The plan: seize key ports and cities fast, before the US can intervene. But Taiwan is no pushover. It has been turning itself into a porcupine, a country that's extremely hard to swallow. Its military has invested heavily in mobile missile platforms, drone swarms, naval mines, and anti-ship systems. Every road and building could become part of the resistance. The people of Taiwan are trained, equipped, and motivated to fight for every inch. And yet, the outcome would depend not just on Taiwan's will, but on who joins the fight. US, allied response, red lines and risk calculations. Moment China crosses the strait and launches an invasion of Taiwan, the spotlight shifts to Washington, Tokyo, and Canberra. The world waits to see. Will the United States and its allies act, or will they watch from the sidelines? Officially, the US follows a policy of strategic ambiguity. It doesn't promise to defend Taiwan, but it also doesn't rule it out. This vagueness is designed to deter both Beijing and Taipei from making reckless moves. But in a 2026 invasion, ambiguity ends the moment the first missile lands. The United States has multiple military assets positioned in the Indo-Pacific, aircraft carriers in the Philippine Sea, air bases in Okinawa and Guam, and intelligence networks across the region. A rapid response could include airstrikes on Chinese, naval forces in the Taiwan Strait, cyber offensives to disrupt China's command and control, naval blockades to choke off Chinese oil imports through the South China Sea, direct support to Taiwan's forces, including real-time targeting and arms resupply. But military action isn't automatic. The cost would be enormous. China has advanced anti-ship missiles, so-called carrier killers, that could sink U.S. vessels. A direct war between nuclear powers carries unimaginable risk. The U.S. would have to weigh its credibility as a global leader against the real possibility of escalation into World War III. Japan, meanwhile, would face intense pressure to act. Its islands are close to Taiwan, and its security is tied to regional stability. But its constitution limits offensive operations. Would it rewrite its doctrine overnight? Australia might offer logistical and intelligence support, but sending combat troops would trigger fierce domestic debate. South Korea, locked in its own fragile balance with North Korea, might hesitate to engage. NATO's role would be minimal militarily, but politically, the West would likely rally behind Taiwan through sanctions, tech embargoes, and financial isolation of China. Still, time would be the critical factor. The first 72 hours of the invasion could determine whether Taiwan stands alone or becomes the front line of a global coalition. As war erupts in the Taiwan Strait, the ripple effects are immediate and worldwide. No country remains untouched. Every capital must choose: support Taiwan, side with China, or stay out of it altogether. Let's start with Asia. India, China's major regional rival, would likely condemn the invasion. But would it act? New Delhi might increase military readiness along its contested border with China, forcing Beijing to divert attention and resources. Still, India would likely avoid direct involvement, choosing instead to gain diplomatic leverage and bolster its role as a counterweight in Asia. Southeast Asia is caught in a dangerous bind. Nations like Vietnam and the Philippines are wary of Chinese aggression, but heavily dependent on trade with Beijing. Publicly, they might call for peace. Privately, some may offer quiet support to the US or Taiwan. Others, like Cambodia or Laos, could lean toward China, hoping for economic favors in return. Then there's Russia, already locked in confrontation with the West. Moscow could use the distraction to escalate its own ambitions, perhaps in Eastern Europe or the Arctic. While unlikely to send troops, Russia might back China diplomatically, sell weapons, or coordinate cyber operations. On the other hand, Europe would likely react with unified outrage. Although far from the battlefield, European nations would understand the stakes. A Chinese victory by force could set a precedent for aggressors everywhere. Expect sweeping sanctions, cutting-edge tech restrictions, and frozen assets similar to what we've seen in other global conflicts. Meanwhile, the Middle East and Africa would watch carefully. Some governments might see opportunity: new weapons deals, shifting alliances, or a chance to play both sides. For others, a prolonged conflict could mean higher oil prices, disrupted trade, and political instability. The global economy would reel. Stock markets would plummet. Supply chains, especially for semiconductors, would seize up overnight. Taiwan produces over 60% of the world's advanced chips. A war would mean shortages, inflation, and a tech shock felt in every industry. From smartphones to missiles, aftermath, victory, defeat, or a new Cold War. If China invades Taiwan in 2026, the outcome would not just shape East Asia, it could reshape the global order for an entire generation. But how would it end? There are three main possibilities. First, a swift Chinese victory. If Taiwan is overwhelmed quickly, and the US and its allies hesitate or respond too late, Beijing could seize control before a broader war ignites. This would be a devastating blow to Western credibility. China would likely install a puppet government, impose martial law, and purge opposition. The message would be clear: China is willing and able to redraw borders by force, but such a victory wouldn't come cheap. Even if the world avoids all-out war, the diplomatic backlash would be massive. China could face a full decoupling from the West's sanctions, export bans, frozen investments. Its economy might suffer long-term isolation. The world would be split into hardened blocks, ushering in a new Cold War. Second, Taiwan holds dot with US and allied support. Taiwan's military could survive the initial onslaught, repelling beach landings, resisting occupation, and dragging China into a costly quagmire. In this case, China risks humiliation, internal dissent, and economic collapse. The Chinese Communist Party has tied its legitimacy to reunification. A failed invasion could shake the regime to its core. Third, escalation beyond control. This is the nightmare scenario. Miscalculations on either side could spiral into direct war between nuclear powers. The South China Sea could become a combat zone. Conflict could spread to the Korean Peninsula, to Japan, even to US territory. Once missiles start flying, there may be no going back. In any case, the world would change. Military spending would skyrocket across Asia. Global supply chains would fracture into rival systems. The United Nations and global institutions would face a legitimacy crisis. The age of predictable peace and open markets would end, but perhaps the most dangerous consequence is psychological, the normalization of force. If Taiwan falls, other authoritarian regimes might feel emboldened. Borders would become negotiable. Power, not law, would decide the future. That's why this what if isn't just theoretical. It's a warning. If you found this scenario insightful, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep strategic analysis. Because understanding tomorrow's wars is the first step to preventing them.